Alright, today I'm going to do Windows static hardening for configuration settings on localhost, meaning no red team around. This is just a simple to get you started hardening localhost. I'm going to do it as simple as I can. I'm not going to use any scripts. I'm not going to use any, I'm not going to use much command line. Mostly going to use the GUI, and I'm not going to include web apps or services that will be scored for competitions. I'm just going to include configuration settings and security options. I will do those in later videos most likely, but for now we're just going to focus on the simple things. Basically, this is the first bunch of things you should do when you get on a system you need to harden. So when you start, run comp mgmt dynamisc. You want to look at your local users and groups here. And you want to just disable every account except for administrator. So go to properties and make sure account is disabled. The reason we're not deleting these accounts is because they may have important files on them. Certain competitions require certain accounts be left alone. So our last man standing is administrator. We want to rename this guy just because it's not good to proclaim to the network that you're the administrator of this computer. You also want to set a password. This is going to be changed later, but this is just so that you don't leave the default password on there, because default passwords are probably the worst thing you can possibly do. We're going to change this later, but for now just make sure you don't have the default anymore. You want to look at your groups. Administrator should only have administrator in it. And I mean administrator being the account you just renamed. Backup operators, guests. Mainly just look for accounts with higher privileges, so power users, telnet clients, remote desktop users, people with access to remote desktop. Just make sure these groups are empty, and make sure administrators only has administrator in it. Look at your shared folders. The $sign behind the name indicates that it's hidden. I generally don't mess with this because it's hidden and usually isn't a problem. I'll get back to you guys if it turns out that I'm wrong and we should remove those. But for now, just leave it alone. Make sure sessions and open files are both blank. And that sums it up for comp management. Next, we want to move to the firewall. Yes, turn it on. Alright, turn firewall on. Exceptions. Here you're going to add any services and ports that you're currently using. So if you have a mail server, you want to add Outlook Express. If you want to add, say we needed SSH for whatever reason on here, SSH 22. And then you just put your IP address here, unless you want to change it for the whole network. And then you'd add it, and then it's a rule on there now. I don't like the way these old Windows machines have the rules set up, but it's just something you have to learn to deal with in the field. Go to advanced settings. I pretty much turn all these on, except for redirect and packet too big, because redirect sounds kind of sketchy, and packet too big is IPv6 only, which we're not going to use anyway. Redirects are different kind of attacks. It can be used for legitimate purposes, but I generally just leave it off because I haven't seen the need to use it. Now that we have our ping on, turn logs on, and hit OK. We're pretty much done with firewall. Now let's take a look at the services running on the box. Before you do anything, a couple red flags. Telnet should be off. Okay. Remote registry, stop. Disabled at startup. Print spooler. Big one right here. You should never have this started, ever. Well, unless you have a printer. But that's very rare for competitions. In the workplace, maybe. If you see Terido right here, but it's not there. All the other services are pretty much context sensitive. If you don't need it, turn it off, but that can also break things. So generally, it's just, if you're not sure about it, Google what it is. I'm not going to run through all of these because it would just take too long. And honestly, if it's not opening a port, it's not really causing that much trouble. General rule. I think we're good for there for now. Just never disable SSH in remote desktop because I don't want to say never, but usually they're used for competitions. If you're on Linux, SSH especially. So if you're playing it safe, which you generally want to. Okay, I'm going to go to gpedit.msc. Brings up the group policy editor. I lost my file. Now this next part is kind of rough. I scripted this next part. Generally you should too, but I'm going to run through it the manual way anyway. So, a couple settings we want to change. Windows settings, security settings, local policies, security options. And you see we renamed our administrator account right there. It's recognized. It may not be a bad idea to rename the guest account to something like, let's be funny and rename it root. Throw some red teamers off. Alright, so go down to network security. Do not store LAN manager hash value on next password change. Basically, LAN manager hash is really weak. You don't want things stored in LAN manager hash values. So enable this. Authentication level, change this to the bottom one. I'm not going to read that whole string. Continue. What's next? SAM accounts. Where are they? Up here. Do not allow anonymous enumeration of SAM accounts. Yes. Enable the one below it too. We don't want anonymous. That sums it up for now. Now that we've done this, we want to go change our administrator password again. The first time was just to not leave it default. This time, make it something good because it won't be stored in LAN manager hash anymore. So try to do something that's 16 characters or more. I'm not gonna do that right now because that's just... Alright, I lied, I will. There's a 16 character password. I didn't count, so don't call me out on that if it's not. Anyway, nice long password. there's our root account on Windows. One more configuration on localhost before this video ends. Type in ncpa.cpl, aka network connections in the control panel. You can tell that I never use the start menu, which is why I have Windows 8. But go to properties, internet protocol. If you want internet, and this is something everybody should already know, but change this to NAT, just so I have internet. If you're doing this in a VM, this is obtain both of these automatically if you have internet. If you're NAT or bridged, obtain both automatically. That's just a quick side note. That's not something you'll probably actually have to do in a competition. It'll probably already be set that way. If you see IPv6 here, Internet Protocol version 6, uncheck the box because of current, we don't really use IPv6 in competitions because it's really hard to configure and make secure. So we generally just leave it off because it's not worth having on. I think I've covered all of the basic localhost configuration settings. So for now, I'm just going to end the video, and I'll go over some tools later and configuring some services. But for now, this is just a good baseline. This is a good place to be before you start doing anything with any services, websites, web apps, tools. So if you have any questions, just leave a comment. If I said anything that's blatantly wrong, leave a comment. If you want me to add anything in this video or future videos, just leave me a comment. I'm open to anything. But this is the end of this video.